Welcome to the Awakened Goddess Show, your source for inspiration, wisdom, and personal discovery. The place to learn from a diverse mix of mentors, metaphysical experts, spiritual leaders, and best-selling authors from around the world. I'm your host, Angela Wilkinson. Join me as I explore the minds of my masterful guests while they share powerful insights and easy-to-use tools you can start using right away. Now, let's tap into the energy of the Awakened Goddess and be enlightened by today's guest. Nin Bebeau created 4 graduate schools in psychology and healing in Boulder, Colorado with her husband, Charles. She created a priestesshood called the Kadisha and has led women's rituals for over 20 years. She's also traveled around the world giving talks on how we can work together as a global family. She also went on specific peace missions to Beijing, Jerusalem, South Korea, and even North Korea. Nin is currently the founder and director of Florence Organizes, a bipartisan inclusive organization dedicated to protecting human rights and the environment. Now let's welcome Nin to the show. Hi, I'm Angela Wilkinson, and welcome to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show, where we co-create powerful, conscious conversations on the leading edge. Today I have Nin returning back to the show, and we're going to be talking about the history of the goddess. And I'm really, really excited because, of course, that's what the show is all about, the Awakened Goddess. So welcome back, Nin.
Thank you.
Just a little backstory for you guys that are watching and listening. I've hung out with Nin a few times now, and she has been doing some incredible work throughout her life, doing peace work all around the world, and I just want to take a second to acknowledge that because we don't really have a chance to talk about it on the show today. But Nin, you are just like full of so much wisdom. And so thank you for coming back on the show and sharing that with us today.
My pleasure. It's always a joy to be here with you.
All right, so let's get started. You're going to take us on a journey through the ages. So where do we begin?
We begin about 300,000 years ago.
Oh, is that all?
That's all. Yes. Back 300,000 years ago, the Great Mother was the primary deity. And it was a time when there was no separation between the divine and the mundane or the human world. And so therefore, people didn't even have a concept of the mother or God. It was just part of life. You were part of life. And even though the people's lifestyle was simple, their security was far beyond anything we have today because they belonged to life. And every child was a gift from life, so every child was treasured. And today, if you spill your milk on the rug, you might get yelled at. And certainly if you break the lamp, it's terrible. But back when you lived in the forest, in a tribe, you spilled the milk, you just wasted your milk. So there was very little reason to yell at anyone, to scold them, to tell them what was right and wrong. So each new birth was another pair of hands that would help your survival. So in those days, people welcomed each other and were grateful to have each other because it increased their survival potential. And it was very rare for anyone to leave their tribe, the group that they were born into. But if some terrible disaster happened and they were launched out in the world, they could easily go to another group without this stranger danger that we have today, because people would look at them and go, another pair of hands, how wonderful, we'll survive better. And so during these 300,000 years, when they were part of life, part of the Great Mother, and the Great Mother was part of them, and there was no separation. In those days, there was very little change. There was virtually no change. How they did their food and how they built their lodgings and how they interacted with each other pretty much did not change for 300,000 years. Mm-hmm. And the reason was because there was no discontent. Mm-hmm. It was just life and part of life. And so you could see that this new baby has grandma's eyes. you could see that this quirky little behavior is just like Grandpa. So while they may not have had a concept of reincarnation, they had the security of knowing that Grandpa comes back, Grandma comes back, life comes back. Winter might have all the plants dying, but summer comes and they all come back. So there's security, there's no fear of death because there was an intrinsic understanding of the oneness.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it sounds like the cycle of life was just really,
yes,
part of daily life.
Yes. I once lived off grid where I chopped wood and carrying water, and it really connects you that when you wake up, you have to make the fire to get warm, and so you don't flip on any switches. You have to interact with and have an experience of every part of life when you're living close to nature. So this went on, and why did it end? If it was so idyllic, why would anybody choose to have it end? Well, it didn't choose. There are ages. And in the Mayan calendar, in India, where they have the yugas, there are 5,000 years. And Plato talked a lot about 5,000 years. God's year is 26,000 years with months, 12 months of more or less 5,000. Mm-hmm. And so at this period, the god of war ascended. And he wanted to take over power. Well, the mother had always had the power, but now he wanted it. So what he did was he instituted diabolical laws. Like he made these statues that look like Easter Island, where it's a big head and an open mouth, and inside it was like a chimenea with a fire inside. Mm-hmm. And you had to feed your firstborn son into the fire.
Oh, goodness.
Now, what that does is it hardens your heart. Mm-hmm. It lowers your compassion. And then he made other rules, like you have to come to the temple 3 times a day and give sacrifice. And so you're always under his thumb. You're always right there, involved with the laws and the priests and all of that. And so his army was called the Kurgans. And this is about 5000 BC. And they marched through what would be Turkey now, Anatolia. And as I said, the people just welcomed them. They knew of nothing else. And of course, they were murdered. And by the time people figured it out, they needed to do something else. They couldn't have that same complete embrace. So they needed someone that was still the loving, inclusive, creative presence that the mother had always been. But now they needed something that could defend, something that was a warrior, something that had power. And so now we have the emergence of the goddess. And the goddess, whereas the mother has huge breasts and a huge belly, because that's the fertility of life. That's more food, more of life force. But now we had the slender, sexy goddess, because now she had to be lithe. She had to run. She had to throw. She had to be powerful. And so the goddess was the goddess Inanna. And if you go back to the cuneiform, which is the first writings on earth, they talk about the goddess Inanna. She was the goddess of love and passion. At that time, there were these gods, Enlil and Enki, means god of the sky and god of the land. And they divided up the land into Mesopotamia, into the land of the 2 rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris, and the other one was the Nile. And so Inanna lived by the Tigris and Euphrates. Later on, she moved over to live by the Nile. And so when she lived in Egypt, her name was Isis.
Yes.
And in both places, you hear her story. And this is the key, is that over time, you hear different stories about goddesses. Seems like a lot of goddesses.
Right.
But your name is Angela. And if you go to California, your name is Angela. If you go to New York, your name is Angela. Your name stays Angela. But in those days, that was not what a name was. In one place, you'd be the woman with the red hair. In another one, you'd be the woman with the magnificent eyes. And so if you hear the story of the woman with the red hair, and you hear the story of the woman with the magnificent eyes, you think those are 2 different stories of 2 different goddesses.
Sure.
But in actuality, if you look at the story, it's the same story. So therefore, it's simply you taking your story with you to different places. So in the story of Isis and Osiris, they were lovers in the womb. They were brother and sister, therefore they were equals, and they were born together of the mother. In Sumer, the land of the two rivers, there was, once again, Inanna and her brother Utu, who fell in love. But at that time, because of power, they separated them. But the Prince of Peace, Dumuzi, the son of the god who ruled Egypt, became her lover. And so it was the Prince of Peace and the Goddess of Love, the Prince of Peace and the Goddess of Love. And one was Isis and Osiris, and the other one was Inanna and Dumuzi. Dumuzi is Osiris. The same story, killed by their brother, the god of war. In Sumeria, I don't think he's actually called the god of war in Egypt, but his name is Seth. And so that tragedy of finding the man you love, the man who treats you like a sister, equal power, in other words, not platonic.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Not platonic at all, but equal power. And creating a society based on freedom, on artisticness, on love, on creativity, on union, on bringing the best of everything together. That was the dynamic between the two of them. But then we also have the brother, the god of war, who kills Dumuzi, who kills Osiris. And later on, when she moves to Cyprus and changes her name to Aphrodite, there too, Tammuz is killed. She becomes Ashera. Ishtar. She becomes Ishtar in Babylon. And there in Babylon, she also loses her lover. And so it's always this loss of the lover. And it's always the Prince of Peace dies young. It becomes the myth that he has this tragic loss of life, and she has the tragedy of losing the man she loves.
Well, they sound like very strong archetypes.
Well, they become a pattern that repeats itself throughout history. And this is the beginning. This is the first time. And, the first time you've ever done anything, it has the strongest impact. So this is the beginning of those prototypes, those archetypes. And there's a lot of history that goes back during this period that, whereas Inanna created cities where art and trade and universality, because they did unearth in Anatolia, or Turkey, a magnificent city called Çatalhöyük, however that's pronounced. And there they saw that men and women were equal, and that men of all races were equal. And so that was, wherever you see the goddess, you find those principles. But Marduk, this god of war, he had priests who wrote down the myths, the old myths, and gave them the twist, the diabolical twist. So in one story, instead of Marduk murdering Dumuzi, instead of the brother, the god of war, killing the Prince of Peace, as it happens in all the other myths, he changes that. And he has the story that she is responsible for his death, that she goes into the underworld because she wants to conquer that world too, and that they say she can't leave the underworld unless she finds a substitute. So she comes back and she says, take him. And so, of course, that becomes the popularized myth. But you can find myths that are written earlier that say how Dumuzi was murdered by his brother. So we have the goddess come in, and she lives first in the land of the two rivers, which was called the cities of Eden. And then she moves on to Egypt, the story of Isis. And then we have stories of the same stories repeated throughout time, and we have Asherah in Canaan. and she has a daughter, Anat. And Anat is in love with her brother, and the brother is Baal, the Prince of Peace, and she is the goddess, and they fell in love in the womb. And then in that myth, there's two brothers, the god of the sea and the god of the underworld, Yam and Mat, and they plot and kill Baal. In early Greece, you have once again, Apollo has a twin sister, Artemis. In that story, it goes a little differently. It says that Artemis was in love with Orion, and one day Orion is swimming out into a great lake, or into the Mediterranean Sea, probably, and along comes Apollo, and he's watching Osiris swim out into the water. And a little while later, Artemis comes by. And he says to Artemis, most diabolically, he says, "Oh, everybody thinks you're the best archer. I don't think so." She goes, "I'm a great archer." He goes, "No, you're not. I bet you can't hit that rock out there. You know, the one just beyond our vision?" And she goes, "I can shoot that rock." And so, indeed, she shoots the arrow. It hits the rock, but it's not a rock. It's Orion. And so he tricks her into killing her own beloved.
Well, what a little snot.
Oh, Apollo is quite a snot. He has a temple with words all over it that say something about control your women and women should have no rights or whatever. You know, he was in early Greece. They had the god Apollo subsume all of the female functions, and they wanted to do away with women and just say the male with the total beauty of everything, and the perfect relationship is an older man with a younger man.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Yeah. They just wanted
that
to
didn't seem
erase
to carry,
the feminine.
That didn't carry much through the timeline.
No, doesn't reproduce. Well, women were kept as breeders, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You know, you marry for state, but you love for. You have this relationship. And when a man gets older, he just chooses a younger man. It's a common initiation.
Days, a lot of them choose a younger woman.
Oh, yes. That's right. So, back to Inanna. At one point, she got fed up with the patriarchs because they were running the father number, like be an obedient daughter and do what we say. And they're dividing up all the land and making rules and laws and making life hard for humans. And she wasn't into that. So she goes on to challenge them, and they bring warriors in and destroy the country. And so she escapes first up to Turkey, Anatolia, and that's where she creates Catalayuk. And then she moves over to Cyprus, where she changes her name to Aphrodite. Then from there she goes down to Crete, which was a goddess culture, which was one of the most advanced cultures that have ever lived on this earth, because men and women were completely equal. They dressed very skimpily. It was a very warm environment, so sexuality was a major joy and celebration in their lives. Plus, they would jump, a man and woman would hold hands and jump over a bull, over his horns.
Oh, wow.
It was dangerous.
Yeah.
But because they trusted each other, because they were so in sync with each other, they could do this. To survive it, the man had to completely trust the woman, and she had to completely trust him, and they had to coordinate totally to jump over it and be successful.
Wow.
So it was a complete equality. Of course, the Greeks invaded, and that was the end of that. And
so do we see a carry through anywhere? Like when you think of the cultures, and do you see anything similar to that today?
I think all the elements are still here. And that this is an extremely important time because this is a time of a great age change. And up until now, there was a 5,000-year period. And if you go to the Bible, it's 5,000-ish years old. So that was the reign of the god of war. I'm sure some people don't want to hear that. But in any case, 5,000 years was the reign of God and the reign of war. And if you look at the planet, there has been active war on this planet someplace most of the time during that 5,000 years. And when you go through the Bible, it's really a chronicle of either who begot who or who killed who conquered who. And so if that's our model of how to create society, which the Bible has been our key model, war is intrinsic in it. Domination.
Right.
You want that land, go take it. And how do you take it? When I first studied the Old Testament, I found diabolical phrases. I found them diabolical because they sounded so simple. And they took over the land. Took over. Translation, genocide,
Yeah.
And the Hittites just took over the Philistine lands. Genocide. They don't use the word genocide, but that's what these different cultures.
Rape and pillage. How about that?
Rape and pillage, became the way of the land. So in the cuneiform that tells all these stories, they talk about the mother goddess, and her name was Ninmah, and she had a mountain called there was a war. There was a war on Earth. The gods were fighting to take all the land, and she stopped the war, and she took them over to her mountain to make peace, because that's what the mother does. And then, to honor her for having done that, they changed her name to Ninhursag, and the mountain became Mount Herzog, and it's in the Sinai, and it's the same mountain that Jehovah went up and gave Moses the tablets from, and they call it Mount Sinai. He just kind of subsumed her mountain.
Yeah.
Now that little element of he just subsumed it, that repeats. That's a theme that repeats itself, Apollo goes to Adelphi, where the oracle lives, and he just claims it. The immigrants come to this land, this hemisphere, and they claim America. Excuse me. You know how many tribes are already living here? They don't count,
There is something about claiming.
Claiming.
Yes.
It's called a patriarchal male energy. It just has to dominate everyone and everything, subsume it, and assume that its only existence is to serve you. Now that exists right here and right now. And now that we're at that place at the end of the 5,000 years, we have a phenomenon on the planet, which I call a supernova. That's when an energy is about to die, and before it dies, it burns brighter than ever before. Sometimes when a person is dying, they lose all their symptoms and they look great. And people think, oh, you're recovering, when in actuality, you're about to die. Right. And so what's happening on the planet right now is the end of the 5,000 years, the end of this patriarchal period, the end of the reign of the god of war, and he's going to hold fast as much as he can. So there's an incredible wave going through the planet right now promoting male supremacy, promoting white supremacy, promoting grab all you can and make it yours, which is the 1%.
Right.
So getting back to the goddess, she was always about a circle, about a shared circle, because everybody's equal in a circle. Whereas the pyramid is the man on top, and then a hierarchy underneath it. The few that are the most important, lesser important, until here you have the masses of the planet all there as some version of servants or slaves. Their only purpose in existing is to feed energy upward to all the other stratus.
Sure.
And the pipeline today is part of that dynamic, because white supremacist males are trying to destroy what belongs to the indigenous people, trying to destroy their culture, trying to destroy their beliefs, making them extraneous, irrelevant, have no rights. And so there is that wave on the planet, which seems like we're moving backwards in time and life. After all the things we've gained, we're losing it. But one can have hope by recognizing that when a person has real power, they can be magnanimous and they can share. Sure. When one is desperately losing power, there's a mad grab to hold on to it. And if you look at the world now, there's that mad grab. Mm-hmm. So you can see it's the dying of the patriarchy as it was in the myth of the ages that is coming to closure. Mm-hmm. In fact, in the mythology, there's a number of cycles. And these cycles, like the 5,000 years. There's also one that has 12 months in the 5,000 years. Those are the ages, like the Aquarian age or the Pisces age. And those are 1,260 years long. 1,260 years long. And each one is called a month. And this is the Aquarian month. So we're moving into the age of Aquarius. And Aquarius is the archetype of globalization and equality. It doesn't recognize any kind of hierarchical system. Mm-hmm. So here we are at the beginning of a new age where we're going to have equality, but how are we going to get from here to there? So you're going to have this extreme of the patriarchy. People are going to rebel against the extreme, mm-hmm. and then there'll be some dynamic. And when the dynamic clears, there will be a whole different social structure on the planet that will adhere to the ideology of the next age, which is brother-sister, male-female equality. It used to be might makes right, and so the males had the extra power. They can force their will. But today, with the internet and all the technology, it's intelligence. Yeah, it's the shrewd cunning that females may have more of. Mm-hmm. Going back.
So hold on. So I want to take a quick break, yes. And then when we come back, we're going to keep going.
Okie dokie.
Are you an Awakened Goddess Show insider? Each and every month, our members receive lots of fantastic perks, including behind-the-scenes conversations from the show, outrageously fun virtual happy hours, bonus meditations, powerful activations, and healing energy work with the guests, exclusive gifts and private readings, on-demand access to the show, plus an invite to join our private community. Visit our website today at theawakenedgoddess.com for more information. Now back to the show. I have a question before we move forward. So it seems like what you're describing with the patriarchal system is that it's the shadow of the divine masculine. Mm-hmm. Is that right? This domination and just taking over?
There are different forms of the feminine, there are different forms of the masculine. Mm-hmm. And in the mythology, you have the Prince of Peace. And these are men who have access to their masculine side and access to their feminine side. These are men who can nurture and care. These are men who are artistic and creative and musical. These are people who aren't prejudiced against women or they're feminine within themselves. Mm-hmm. But what happened with the patriarchy is you had the one at the top, the one God, the one right way. And then you queued up beneath that. Mm-hmm. So there was no room for the feminine in there. There could only be the God, the masculine attributes. Only that which is most masculine is worthwhile. Anything that's feminine is devalued. As we move here into the brother-sister, the masculine and the feminine are equally valued. So your ability to make impact in the world and your ability to feel and care and nurture are equal in each human being, masculine or feminine human beings. And so what's happening as the Prince of Peace, they're in touch with their inner world and they're effective in the outer world. Whereas the patriarchal consciousness is masculine only, everything else is less than, mm-hmm. devalued. And it was really hard in the patriarchal paradigm for men who are balanced, mm-hmm. because they were called sissies, right. And they were teased and ridiculed and devalued because they did not reject the feminine, because they integrated the feminine. And so there's been big clashes between the patriarchal and the less dominant types. I was watching a movie about Florence Nightingale last week, and there's this one scene where she's a nurse in this army hospital, and the general in charge, he says, no chloroform, just cut off their legs.
Oh,
and she's like appalled. The pain. He goes, I want men who are strong enough to face it. That consciousness, that total lack of the body, no respect for the body at all. Just cut off the leg, throw it away. Pain, go on past it. Ignore
well, but there's also another component. It seems like it's like there's this elevation of self where it's me and them. Like if this person was going through an excruciating experience, you sure bet that they would want the chloroform. They would.
Well, they're the patriarchal male, meaning the dominant father figure, who throws these young boys into battle and doesn't care about their well-being at all.
Mm-hmm.
When Florence Nightingales find them, they're just taken off the battlefield and left right there in the straw for their wounds to fester. It's not washed or cleaned. And when she comes in and goes, we'll take care of that, they say no, because they don't care. That's how we can have all these wars, because it's these mature men who are not going to fight, who have that egotism. Mm-hmm. And World War I was about cousins who were not going to lose to each other. Millions of people died in a war, men, women, and children, because these cousins were going to see who was more powerful. Mm-hmm. And there have been wars between, well, I'm not going to let you get the best of me. These two guys running their ego trip on each other, and millions of men, women, and children died. That's what a lot of wars have been about.
Right. A lot of it is, I think, smoke and mirrors, too. It's like, let's create drama over here, so you're looking this way when we're doing some shenanigans over here.
Oh, we have a lot of that going on right now. I think that President Trump is doing his song and dance to terrify everybody, so everybody has their eyes glued to him. What's he doing today? And while everybody's watching Trump, who's watching those 1% and what they're doing? The corporations are stealing everything, and he's a front man for them. But back to the goddess.
Yes.
Back to the goddess.
Yeah, we're not here to man hater, Trump hater.
No. Just
we're here to educate.
We're here to recognize what's going on.
Yeah.
But back to the goddess. If we go to the Gnostic Gospels, they talk about the Great Mother as being Sophia, and that Sophia was all there was, and she created the world. And after she created the world, the beautiful world of manifest, she was lonely. She wanted to share it with someone. And so out of her own being, she created a god. I had a bumper sticker once that said, my goddess gave birth to your god. So Sophia, even in the old biblical version, God created Adam and then he put him to sleep and created Eve. But who breathed life into them? And that was Sophia. She's the breath, the ruach, the life force, that which moves through your veins. When you don't have breath, you don't have life. You immediately die. You can go without food for a while, you can go without water for a while, but you can't go without breath. And she's the one that breathes the breath, the life force, the chi into people's bodies. Sophia. Even in the Bible it says so. But in the Gnostic version, she was lonely and wanted to experience another life other than her own, and out of her own being she created this god, and she named him Illibrat. And then she created all of this magnificent water and trees, the sky and the stars and the land and all of the magnificent beings on this planet. And he was charmed for a while.
Yeah.
And then he got bored. She created all these things and he loved it for a while and he got bored. And so finally she created humanity, and she thought now he has a creature that he can really match wits with, and this will keep him engaged. Mm-hmm. But he really became oppressive, and he wasn't a good influence. He made them suffer. Kind of like the story of Job, where God and the devil make a bet that to see if he can keep his holiness even in the midst of all this terrible, terrible loss. And they torture the poor fellow, but he never loses his faith, thus proving that man can have a higher level of consciousness than either God or the devil. And so Illibrat is making people suffer, and this breaks her heart, because the Divine Mother felt that humanity was her masterpiece. And she could not bear to watch the oppression that Illibrat was inflicting upon them. And so she decided to create somebody else. Someone who could push against Illibrat. Now, she could take him right out of her own essence, like she did with him, but she thought it didn't work the first time. Why would it work the second time? Goddesses are smart, you know? And so she decided she's going to go and find a human who has all the attributes she wants. So the goddess is a divine force that can live in any form. It's the essence. So a goddess force can live in an animal. It can live in a tree or a flower. It can live in us. And indeed, every woman is a vessel holding this divine feminine force, holding the goddess. So she turned herself into a dove. She liked doves. And she floated around, looking at all these different humans. And there was a woman sitting by a pool, and the dove landed on her hand, and the woman just petted the dove and cooed, cooed, cooed. And you know, the goddess liked that sound so much that doves have cooed ever since. And she thought, this woman has compassion. This woman has a strong sense of the creative force. And so she turned herself from being a dove into being a whiff of life force, just a wisp, and floated into her body and impregnated her. And this was Mary. And Mary gave birth to Jesus. Different version than the usual story, but this is a Gnostic form of Christianity, and it is a goddess who gave birth to Jesus. And Jesus was born to make God conscious. And that was his mission. And so during that period, Jesus interacts with Illibrat, trying to teach him to see the ramifications of his actions. In the mainstream Christian version, he brings in the concept that in the Old Testament, God is ferocious. He wants obedience. And Jesus says, no, God is loving, and we can make him more loving. And so it's interesting that it's humanity who makes God more loving in the mainstream version. And in the Gnostic version, he makes God more conscious of the ramifications of his actions. But still, Jesus having an effect on this older patriarchal power. The Prince of Peace, the Son, enlightens the Father, like the brother enlightening the Father. So that's another version of those myths. And moving along, there are many myths of the goddess throughout time. And we have to understand that they often go through a lot of editing. And in the medieval times, they made stories that were purposely created to keep women apart and distrustful. And so you have all of the fairy tales of the three sisters, where two of them are plotting against the happiness of the third. And the third, mostly, what they have mostly against him is that he's the favorite of the father. Or the true daughter of the father. And in all the fairy tales, they slander the mother. The mother is always the cause of all problems. She's the wicked stepmother. She's only here to destroy your happiness. And that's another way. Don't trust the mother. And so in my lifetime, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had. I was a psychotherapist, and I listened to a lot of people's stories, and it's all the mother's fault.
That's right.
I love the part where father rapes the child, and it's the mother's fault. Well, she didn't protect me. Well, what about your father? He couldn't help it.
Right.
He loved me so much, and she wasn't giving him what he needed, so he turned to me. Now, if that isn't a perverted spin on that story, but I've done psychotherapy with those people several times, where their issue is with their mother for not protecting them, rather than the father who actually abused them. But that makes sense in light of all of the media, all of the literature, all of the fairy tales, all of the stories, all of the movies, where it's always the mean mother who's to blame for everything. But the father's above it all, and you want the father's favor. And then there's the sisters fighting over whatever crumbs the father drops, whatever little love or understanding or acknowledgement, the sisters have to fight over it. And it's all based on beauty because beauty is passing. And so a woman's value is given only into her beauty. And when she loses her beauty, she loses her power. Because then she isn't being favored by the father. Wait a minute, what about the intrinsic power? Because the reality is, at least I can say in my life, when I was young, I was beautiful and I was able to get whatever I wanted that way. But when my beauty began to wane, my power began to emerge. Yeah. And now nobody has to give me what I want. Nobody has to give me what I need. I'll go get it. I have empowered myself. And the way I've done it is by forming a relationship with the Divine Mother and feeling like the true party that's going on. I'm not missing a party out there because the party's in here. And the more I trust the Mother and the more I trust myself and the voice within me, the more I am attractive in the world, the more I'm successful in the world, and the more polish everything I do has. And so it's by first agreeing to be in relationship, and then passing her little tests to develop the trust until the point where I absolutely trust the Mother and I put my life on the line and done whatever I was told to because I absolutely believe in her. And it has made my life not any easier. Right. I've certainly had great tragedies in my life, several great tragedies. But my ability to swim through the mire has always been sustained by the Mother. In the dark of the dark, I list my gratitudes. And as long as I had 12 gratitudes, I knew life was worthwhile and I could keep going. As long as the Mother tells me I can handle this, I handle it. I have, people have their opinions and people love to go, oh, it's terrible. You're right. It really is terrible. And you feel despair. But the Mother never does that. The Mother always goes, just look further, you'll find more resources. You'll find meaning and purpose. You'll find that when something goes so far on the left, it propels you into the right. So it may look so terrible, but as far as you go down, that's how high you'll go up. And that your life will be glorious after the suffering. And that some of the suffering has purpose to it. That there are no failures and there are no mistakes. That when you live by the goddess, everything is an apprenticeship to learn, to do more, to do better, to serve the world better. That the pain and the sorrow burns off those terrible beliefs that the patriarchy has given to us, that we claw onto, we hold tightly to this is the way the world is because everybody said so. And our fingers are pried loose until we can no longer follow that route, and we have to believe in the goddess.
Yes. Well, and let me just pause you for a second because we're going to take another quick break. But if you guys are feeling inspired by what Nin is saying right now, she, in the past episode that we got together, she talks about all of the experiences of following the guidance of the goddess. So I highly encourage you, if you have not seen that show yet, to go check it out. Yeah. Okay, so time for a quick break. Have you created vision boards, listened to meditations, and read books on how the law of attraction works, yet you're still not where you want to be? The key to manifesting is focusing your attention on your big dreams consistently, fully embodying the feeling as if it's already happening. And that's why I created the Envision Experience, a revolutionary and simple 28-day process for powerful, quantum-level dream manifesting. So if this sounds interesting to you, I'd love for you to join us. You can find out more at theawakenedgoddess.com/envision-experience. Now back to the show. I'm loving this conversation and hearing about the history of the goddess, and I want to know, how do we reclaim the goddess?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'll start with a story. In the Northlands, there was the goddess Freya, and Freya was the goddess of all the land, and her general came to her and said that there's this necklace, and the dwarfs have made this magical necklace, and I will conquer Dwarf Mountain, and I will get you the necklace. Ooh. I'll kill all the dwarfs, and I'll bring you the prize. Classic, Yeah. Male mind, just take it. Yeah. But the goddess said, no. Thank you for telling me about the necklace. I will get it myself. And so she just got perfumed and dressed, and went over to the mountain. Of course, nobody stopped her. And she walks into the mountain, and she goes into their central chamber where they all have their little hammers and they're chipping away with their jewels, or their little tables making all this beautiful jewelry. And the dwarfs were they were egalitarian, so they didn't have a leader. But they had a spokesperson, and he said, "What would you like?" And she said, "I want the necklace." And he said, "Oh, yes, good choice, a marvelous piece. It's magical, you know." And she goes, "Yes, yes, I want it." And then they negotiate the price. You know, "What would you give me for the necklace?" She says, "Oh, I've got these men I can give you, or I don't want men. Men are too big. They'll bump their heads here. You know, they'll get in the way. What about food and fruit and flowers? No, 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 no. They'll just wilt here. Okay, let's start this way. What do you want for the necklace?" And the dwarf said, "You." So they created a lovely little chamber for her. Everybody took a little shower and got all prettied up. And each dwarf came over and made love to her. And she was like, "Oh, this adventure's really taken a delicious turn," because those dwarfs had these muscles, you know, these great chests and these great arms from all that digging, and they had beautiful long hair. So they were short, but they were really beautiful creatures. Mm-hmm. And so she had this marvelous adventure, and at the end, they gave her the necklace. And they said, "If ever you want more jewelry, we'll be glad to make you more." And so that story morphs through time, and it becomes Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It becomes an innocent child being persecuted by her stepmother, her evil stepmother. Now, that little formula, take the eroticism out and put a wicked woman in, is a formula that the patriarchy has done throughout history to indoctrinate everyone to believe that the feminine is evil. Mm-hmm. And in all the stories, it looks like the shadow of the feminine is the witch bitch, but it's not. The shadow of the patriarchy is actually the domestic doormat, the one who just lays down and obeys. Mm-hmm. And that the feminine has different forms of feminine, but one of them is called Scorpio, it's called Pluto. It is an energy, the goddess of the underworld, who has absolute power. And you know, when you go into the underworld, it has absolute power. And when you come out of the underworld, your suffering, your tragedy, you have a whole encounter with yourself. You know who you are, and that's where your power comes from. To redeem the goddess is to not buy into the collective myth that the feminine is evil, the feminine is weak. You must have a man to do things. You're not as smart, you're not as capable. You have to let go of all of those indoctrinating beliefs and just find out for yourself what is inside of your soul. You go inside and you feel your own power. Do something to create a trance state, something to move you out of the day world. Use your breath. You can just breathe deep and slow in and deep and slow out. And if you keep doing that deep, slow breath, it will create a light trance. Mm-hmm. You can light a candle to bring the light of the mother in to watch over you. You can light two candles, one for the Divine Mother and one for the Prince of Peace, to invite his energy in.
Dude, that'd be great for relationships, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. For relationships, my second husband and I had a great thing we did. It was called Yab Yum. It comes from an old Tibetan ritual where you sit close together, mm-hmm. and you stare into each other's left eye and you breathe together. And you just feel so in sync with each other because the breath governs connectedness. And so you sit with each other, you breathe into each other, same breath, same pattern of breath, and you look into each other's left eye because the eyes are window to soul and the left eye is the deeper soul. And when you're doing that, you create rapport. And then on that day when you're having a conflict and whatever you say is wrong, and even when you say I'm sorry, it pisses them off more, and there's nothing you could do to make amends, you go back and you do this job, yeah, because there's no words. You just sit there and you breathe together. And when you're doing that, you come back into rapport. It's like a bank account. All the times you do this meditation together, you're putting it into the bank account, and on the day of conflict, you can pull it out. Mm-hmm. There's a variation on that where you sit on his lap and he's inside of you. and it's not erotic. I mean, it's just a very slow, it's not going for orgasm. It's going for connectedness and for being one together. So back to how you redeem the goddess. You find out who you truly are. You look at the feminine energies within you and you value them. You look at your life and you say nothing is a failure. Nothing. I've never done anything that I wasn't meant to do. Because at every moment you're trying your best, and if you didn't do very well, you couldn't do very well. If you're under a misconception, well, then you're under a misconception. If you're under a belief that, oh, I can't do that, then you can't do it, you know? But where did you get that belief? Yeah. I once did a scroll saying, I am angry because, and I listed everything from my ancestry, and I listed all from my religion, I listed everything from this country, and everything that's happened to women. And then after I listed all this stuff I inherited, I said, what am I holding in my being that is my personal anger? And even being raped and abused, that wasn't personal. It had to do with that culture in which I lived at that time. So if you look at the afflictions in your life, you've got them because of being a woman in this world today. And if you start honoring being woman, honoring the feminine energies within you, your creativity, your sensitivity, your emotions, your artistic talents, honoring the inner world, your intuition above all, seeing that the most wise and knowing being is inside of your own soul, and learning to hear her voice and not going, oh, maybe I'm making that up. You know, or look at your dreams. That's another avenue into the unconscious. It speaks in symbols a lot of the time. And sometimes there are psychic events that happen in the dream. It doesn't feel like a dream. It feels so real. It is real. It is a visit. And it brings knowledge. And dare to go out in the world and speak your truth. Even if your heart is pounding, even if you're terrified, don't step back from the terror. Step into it. Because if you have biofeedback equipment and you record nervousness and excitement, it's exactly the same thing with a different attitude. So change your attitude and be excited by the things that scare you.
And I was going to say, it never goes away, right? I mean, we, at any age, I mean, you're coming up, stepping into something that's scary for you, and you've been through a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
My late husband, Charles Bebeau, used to say, the devil that is the block is the God of your power. That which is the bane of your existence holds the key to your true life mission, your true power. So you look at the things in your life that scare you, and instead of stepping back, go into them and see why they happen in your life, especially if they happen more than once, again and again. I had a situation where I said, I thought I dealt with that already. Why is that happening? And he said, oh, you think it's going to go away? I go, yeah, of course. He said, no, we incarnate with our teachers. And they refine. First of all, the first time the event occurs, you got to recognize that it's a problem, that it's an event. It's something you have to deal with. Because you see it, you feel it, you have to deal with it. Second time it comes around, you begin to understand more about it. Another time, how to deal with it. Another time to refine your understanding. These events in our lives come around and around and around because they are there to polish up who we are and bring us into our fullness. And because we grow up in school, with parents, with church, with this culture, we are indoctrinated to these toxic beliefs to give up our power and deny who we are and hate the mother and hate the feminine. All of this stuff is poisonous to our soul. And we have to let it go. And it's not something you can do in one day or in one event. And you have to do it again and again and again, each time taking away another layer, to come down to the core of who you truly are, the core of your mission in life, the core of being an incarnation for life itself. You might give birth to children, or you might give birth to art, or you might give birth to a whole new paradigm of cooperation, collective cooperation, where people help each other and everyone prospers, instead of a pyramid where everybody is ripped off, everyone is enslaved, everyone is abused. for the betterment of a couple of people at the top.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I mean, I had no idea that there, yes, I'm familiar with the goddess, but to hear her history, I mean, that's incredible. It gives me a whole new perspective on what it means to be an awakened goddess. So
There's one more thing with what you just said, and that is that when you study all the lives of the goddess, you find out in every single story that she comes to bring gifts, the music and the art and the love and the union, and then she suffers because of some male presence that tries to take everything away from her children, from her people, from her. And so when you redeem your own feminine, when you honor it and love it, you're doing something that transforms the whole age.
Beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining me again today. It's always an honor.
It's always a joy.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show. I hope you enjoyed today's guest and got something you can start using in your life right away. For more spiritual insights and to listen to more episodes, subscribe to The Awakened Goddess Show at theawakenedgoddess.com and discover wisdom that'll change your life.